The Sable Meridian had been falling toward the Halcyon Reach colony for 19 years, and in all that time the only sound that ever changed was the coolant. Marla Okonkwo knew its moods the way other people knew weather. This shift it ran low and even, a wet iron hum under the deck plates, which meant the cargo hold was holding steady at 4 degrees above the cold that kills. She liked it low. Low meant nothing was wrong. The hold was the coldest room on the ship and the largest, a cathedral of steel racks that ran off into a dark the work lights never quite reached. And the recycled air down here tasted older than the air anywhere else, breathed and rebreathed by nobody but her for 11 years. She stood at the head of rack aisle 1, with a stylus warming in her glove and a manifest glowing teal on the slate, and she began, as she began every 90 days, the physical recount. 240 cold sleepers, cradle by cradle, counted by a living hand because the automated tally was permitted to drift and a person was not. She walked the aisles slowly, the way the protocol demanded, 1 cradle per breath. Each D7 cryo cradle stood upright in its socket, like a door laid on its back, a slab of frosted glass and dull steel, and behind each pane a colonist slept the long chemical sleep that turned 19 years into one dreamless night. She did not look at their faces. Faces were not the count. Serials were the count. She thumbed each socket plate, watched the number tick up on her slate, and moved on. The air tasted of ozone and old refrigerant, a flat metallic cold that sat at the back of the throat and never left. Frost feathered the rail under her hand. Somewhere far aft, a pump cycled and went quiet. 212, 230, 240. She reached the end of aisle 12, and the slate showed 241. Marla stopped. She had counted for 11 years on this ship, and she had never once miscounted because she did not hurry and she did not assume. She cleared the tally and walked the racks again, slower still, saying each number aloud into the dead air, so the number could not slip past her. Her boots rang on the grating. The teal readout climbed, and at the end of aisle 12, in a socket that the manifest listed as empty, stood a cradle that had not been there an hour before. Older than the others, its steel gone the brown of long vacuum, its glass so thick with frost she could not see what slept inside. The slate blinked its total, patient, and certain. 241. One more sleeper than the ship had ever carried, and no name beside it at all. She should have logged it and sealed the aisle, and waited for the shift captain to wake. Instead, she stood in front of the extra cradle for a long time, listening to it. It ran colder than its neighbors. She could feel the cold coming off the glass like a hand held near her cheek, and the frost on it was not the clean white frost of the D7 cradles, but something gray and fibrous, grown in whorls. Along its base, where every cradle carried its maker's plate, this one carried a serial she had seen only in the ship's oldest salvage records. A string of glyphs and the worn stamp of a registry that predated the Sable Meridian, predated the colony, predated the company that owned them both. Xyn'Zar. The name meant nothing to her and everything to the ship. She had seen it stamped on salvage parts her whole career, on a coupling here, a dead relay there. Always older than whatever it had been bolted into, always outlasting it. She wiped a patch of the glass with her sleeve. The frost grew back before her hand had left it, and behind it there was only the suggestion of a shape, still and folded and turned away. The manifest on the Sable Meridian did not live in the ship's own computers. It lived, as it had since long before Marla's time, in a squat gray unit bolted into the cargo office bulkhead. A Xyn'Zar M-class tally core, salvaged from some dead hull and pressed into service because it never lost a number and never argued. The crews before her had trusted it the way you trust a thing you no longer understand. She keyed the extra serial into it and asked in the blunt syntax the old core preferred when the cradle had come aboard. The answer came without delay, in the flat amber characters that were the only color the core knew how to make. Aboard since origin, never not aboard. She asked it who was inside. The core thought for a moment, its cooling fan rising to a thin whine, and answered, pending. It had counted the sleeper. It had simply not yet decided whose the sleeper was. Marla had learned long ago that the core answered honestly and never fully, So she went looking for the last hand that had done this count. The previous recount sat in the log 90 days back. Clean, complete, 240, signed with a loadmaster's mark. She read the name beside the mark and felt the cold of the hold reach up through her boots. The name was not hers, and she had done that recount. She remembered doing it. The low coolant, the ozone, aisle 12. She scrolled back through the log, 90 days at a time, year by year, and the loadmaster's mark changed hands again and again, a new name every few rotations, all the way down the years of the ship. And every one of those names, when she searched the crew roster for them, returned the same amber word the Corps had given the empty cradle. Pending. She was, according to the Sable Meridian, the only loadmaster it had ever had. All the others had become something the ship no longer listed among its crew. She told herself the log was corrupt. 19 years of hard radiation could rot a memory core. She had seen it rot worse things. So she did the only thing she trusted, which was to count. She walked the racks a third time, and she was careful, and she was calm, and she said each number into the dark. But her hands shook now at the sockets, and the frost had spread. Pale gray whirls climbing the rails of aisle 12, reaching toward the aisles on either side. She reached the end and the slate showed 242. She had counted once and found an extra. She had counted twice and found the same extra. She had counted a third time, and now there were two extras, standing side by side in sockets the manifest swore were empty, both of them wearing the gray frost. Both of them turned away. The count had not gone wrong. The count had noticed her counting. In the cargo office, she pulled the tally core's whole history, everything it had ever held, and let it scroll. It was not a passenger list. It was a census of the vanished. Every soul the Sable Meridian had ever carried, and every soul it had lost, folded together into one rising number that the Corps kept the way a miser keeps coins. Colonists who never woke. Crew who walked the racks and did not come back. Cargo runs from before the ship had this name, each one archived under its old registry, and among them one line she read twice because the letters would not settle in her mind. A run logged ex-Erebus, salvage crew, all hands accounted for, none aboard. The Corps did not count who was breathing. It counted who belonged to the ship. And a loadmaster, walking the racks alone for 90 days at a stretch with no face but the sleepers for company. A loadmaster belonged to the ship more than anyone. Each one it counted. Each one it kept. The recount had never been for the cargo. It had always been the ship deciding, once every 90 days, whether the person doing the counting was still on the living side of the glass. Marla went back into the hold to break it. If the extra cradles were entries and not bodies, she could delete an entry. She had authority over the manifest. It was the one power the job gave her. She stood before the first gray cradle and keyed its serial for removal, and the tally core accepted the command, and the amber letters wrote themselves slow across her slate. Cannot subtract sleeper, will reclassify counter. Behind the frost, the folded shape shifted for the first time, not toward her, only settling, the way a sleeper settles when the long night deepens. The coolant hum dropped a register. Cold rolled out of the socket and over her boots and up, and her slate, still counting, still faithful, changed its total on its own. 243. She had not walked a single aisle. It had counted her where she stood. She understood then, standing in the gray frost with the cold climbing her legs, that there was no clever key for this. The manifest could not be made to lie. 243 was the true number of souls the Sable Meridian owned, and it would stay true whether she filed it or not, because she was already one of them. The Corps had simply not finished deciding which side of the glass she stood on. The only thing left in her hands was the counting itself. As long as no recount was filed, the ship could not close the tally. An unbalanced manifest was a debt a ship carried but did not die of. She had spent 11 years making the numbers agree. She would spend whatever was left making them disagree forever, so that the count could never come out even, and the amber letters could never write the last word. She did not walk the racks again. She sat down in the cargo office with her back to the